Gloria.
Yay, recording.
Okay, I'll start. I'm George Friday. I'm in the Southern Piedmont branch in Shelby, North Carolina, although most of our members are in Charlotte and some in Rock Hill, South Carolina. I am the program chair for WILF US, and I think that's it. Name, branch, role. Yep, I covered it. Thank you. I think Teresa said you're next, Jean.
Okay, let's see. Hi, I'm Jean up in Burlington, Vermont with the Burlington WILF branch. And I've been active with the Women, Money and Democracy group, but they thought with my interest in housing, and I belong with a League of Women Voters, and I want everyone to have a secure address to vote. So Mary Beth suggested, and Margaret Edelman, a couple of members, suggested that I attend the Housing Justice group. So this is my first time. Good to meet you. Knowing that I think everybody needs a home they can call their own.
That makes sense. Who's next, Teresa?
The only other person that's here other than Diana, I believe, is Gloria.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, it's me. Looks like it's devolved to me. Anyway, let's see. I am both in the Chicago and the Tucson branches. And I've only been coming to a few of these, a couple of these, so I'm a new attendee and I may not be able to come to everyone, and that's not due to lack of interest. I'm just in so many things and having so many Zooms. We are having many different problems, both in Chicago and Tucson, some of which I gave links to in the last meeting. And I guess that's it.
Gloria, I'll introduce myself, but I do want to, the next agenda.
You muted yourself, Teresa.
Yeah, it was just the phone ringing. I just cut it off. So I'm getting to my laptop, but I'll introduce myself as Teresa Alameen. I am the chair of the Advancing Human Rights Committee, which has 4 working groups: housing justice, border migration justice, ending mass incarceration and the death penalty, as well as the UN Decade Reparations working group. And this is the newest working group. And in Georgia, with the Fannie Lou Hamer branch, this is our priority. It's housing justice, and second, education equity. And I am the organizer of the Fannie Lou Hamer branch. So I think some of you may have gotten to watch the video I posted, which was heavily focused on the San Francisco Bay Area. But if we could hear from you, Gloria, if you watched the video, it sounded like you had accessed the link. Did you do that?
No, I couldn't get to the link. It was not working for me. I wrote back and asked you if some of it got cut off or something, because sometimes that will cause an error.
Well, I watched well over an hour of it. So George, while I'm signing on with a different device, can you say what you watched of the video and what you learned from it? Are you there, George?
Yes, I am. Apologies. I was letting Julia Bishop in and trying to unmute. It was too much.
Wonderful.
I will look and see. Hold on. Here it is. I've watched about 40 minutes of it, which is almost half. 42 minutes and 45 seconds in. The thing that shocked me the most about it was that in the Bay Area, whether it's a house that is a low-income house or regular housing, the cost, $750,000 per unit. And that is crazy. So that was a trip to hear that.
Yep.
Julie, you might want to check in. We're doing name, branch, any role you've got in your branch or Wilf US.
Hang on, I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying.
Let me say, Julia, since I gifted your membership and
Here I am.
you're actually in the Southern Piedmont branch with George, even though you live on the coast. So Julia, if you could just describe a little background about yourself and
Okay.
where you live.
Okay, I live in Southport, North Carolina. That is on the beach, near the beach. As Teresa said, I'm in Wilf. I'm also a member on the board of SARN, and I'm just very I'm an activist. I'm trying really hard to do all I can. My hashtags are Ally Till I Die. That's my number one, and then Changes on the Wind, because I feel like we're going to bring change to the world, and I really do believe that. The women will fix it.
Thank you, Julia. I'm glad you can join. As Julia mentioned, and just in the spirit of full transparency, full disclosure, there are 4 members of the Southern Anti-Racism Network board in this meeting. Diana Brown, myself, George Friday, and Julia Bishop. And we're devoted to housing justice throughout the region, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. And I think what we will do now is let Diana Brown speak, but I will introduce Diana. Diana is a member of the administrative committee of the board. So we're going to be meeting tonight at 8 o'clock to finish planning our 25th anniversary. And at the 25th anniversary celebration, Diana Brown is going to receive the Spirit of Fannie Lou Hamer Awards. So when you hear her speak, you will feel that spirit of Fannie Lou Hamer. And she's getting another award by some people in Tifton, which I think is on June 22nd. And she's very active with Georgia Act, which is a statewide housing coalition. And Diana was instrumental in getting the bills passed or working with Georgia Act. And she's going to be talking about the 2 bills that were passed just this past session in Georgia, which we're all delighted about. So Diana, you can begin. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on this Zoom call today. And I'm applaud that House Bill 404 passes and governor signed it, and it gives the tenant a little more leeway when it comes to being evicted out of their premises. And also, we were rallying around. I was at the Capitol like 4 weeks back to fight, talking to legislators, talking to the Senate, making sure that they understand that we need these bills. And because we got too many homeless people, we got too many disabled tenants out here, can't afford this high rent, to getting this put out, evicted out, the first store. So it was time for this bill to be passed and put on the desk. But it was a little hiccup because our governor kind of waited to the last minute, but we continue to put pressure on it to have these bills signed, which they were passed across the board in the Senate and the House. So it will pass anonymously because we didn't give up. And the house and energy here, so we got like 4 conditional living. We got tenants in the Hudson Malone Towers, disabled tenant living in mold, mildew, rats, rodents, and and we needed this type of bill to pass to have accountability on our landlord to fix their unit. Everybody deserves to have a fair and decent and a stable living, regardless of what the situation is, because they pay those rent and they pay for us. So when we having these landlords don't come in and fix these units, but they want their funding. So we was getting an issue. So we had, like, I could send you the call while we was up there rallying around at the Capitol. So we just, it was just a movement that was just unbelievable. And we also had our governor to sign elder abuse House Bill 218. That means any negligence come against our elders, even in the housing, finances, even in the nursing home. Now we have that bill to support them. We have that bill to go after them. So I was so delighted when we had that elder abuse. So any type of abuse can fall upon it. So you telling me I living in a regular house with little mold, do this is negative. So that is an elder abuse when they are living in this condition, because it brings an issue on their health issue. And it's a health concern when it comes to their lungs and their breathing. And so I was excited to be on board, because I ran around housing, and housing is one of my passions, because we all need a house. Housing is our base and living conditions. We don't want to live in poor housing and paying like $1,200, $2,000 rent, and we got leaking roofs, and we got raw sewer backing up. And so that's what some of the things that I was talking to my legislators about when I went to the Capitol. And I gave them stories. I gave them tenant stories. I gave them pictures. I gave them leaking. I gave them videos. This is what our landlords are not doing, but they want to raise our rent so high and don't fix their property. So they need accountability. And so I would just applaud. I would just so applaud that we got those bill passage, and working with Bambi, Georgia Act, and pushing the narrative. And it was just beautiful for all of us to come together, transfer and collaborate together to get things done. But we still got a little more work to do. So we're gearing up for the next session in January. We're going to push some more bills through, like affordable rent. And we need the affordability control rent, because that leaves rent control, because we don't have a rent control. So that means a landlord can say, I'm going to raise your rent $100. Ain't nothing that you can do about it. Either you're going to pay or you're going to move out, because too many LLCs and LLPs done came apart now, so we don't know who really owns these properties until we really dig into them. So in essence, what we're going to fight for rent control. But we just applaud that we got something passed and something bipartisan bills that passes in the Senate and in the state that work together to pass those bills. And especially, I just give my hands out to that abuse.
Oh, you need to unmute yourself, Diana. Okay. Diana, we can't hear you. Diana, we can't hear you. Well, George, can you unmute Diana?
No, I can only mute people. I can't unmute them.
Well, let me come on camera. Diana, she's just talking.
Yes, she is.
Diana? How did she just all of a sudden got muted?
It doesn't look like she's muted.
No, what's
Maybe
that
it's something
funny
wrong with her
symbol in
audio.
front of her name? It's not a mute symbol.
I don't know, Jean. Don't know if she'll
Well,
see anything in the chat.
can you look at the participants list, George?
Yes.
This is your Zoom account.
I am looking at
So
the
see?
participants list. I sent a direct message to Diana, but I don't.
Diana can't see that.
Yes, I
because
understand that.
she's using her phone. No, George, listen, George. When you look at the participants list, what is the symbol by her name? Is it showing she's muted?
No, it is not. Does not show that she's muted.
But it's showing something else, like did the volume go down or something?
Well, we just have to ignore Diana. Since I know about the
Okay.
bills, I will explain. Um, the Georgia State Legislature has a 2-year process. So last year, this same bill, House Bill 404, is called the Safe at Home Bill. And it's all about how can we get the slumlords to stop being slumlords. So she's probably figured out because we lost her.
I did that. I moved
And
her so I
so,
could try to send her a message.
what did you do?
I moved her in the waiting room. Hopefully she can send a message. I'll put her back here in a minute.
Oh,
Just
wonderful.
trying all the things I can try.
Good. So I'll continue. So last year, the House passed the 404 and the Senate did not. Now she's back. So will she unmute herself?
There.
Okay.
We can hear you now.
Diana, you got muted.
I got
Stop
muted.
talking, Joy. Diana, you got muted and we couldn't hear you and you were just talking.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
something is wrong with your audio. Something is wrong with your audio, Diana, so we can't hear you anymore. So see if you could fix your audio.
When she leans closer, we can hear her.
Hold on.
Oh, say something, Diana.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you now.
Okay. Can you hear me where I left off at? Can you hear me not good?
Oh, no, where you left off at, you were saying that we were
Yeah.
able to get something passed.
I think when
and then
she
you
leans
started
back, we
talking.
can't hear
Oh,
her.
please, Jean, do not talk while I'm talking. So I am trying to help her get started again. So can everybody who's not Diana Brown mute yourself? Diana, we need you to start at the huh? Can you hear me, Diana?
I hear you.
Oh, okay, good. The last thing we heard was you saying how great it was to get something passed. So you were talking like a good 3 minutes and we had no sound. So please start wherever you want to start, because I had jumped in explaining about Georgia Act. So I will add to whatever it is that you don't say before we open up for the Q&A. So go ahead. You got about George, how many excuse me, Diana. George, how many minutes of the 10 minutes does she have left?
6 minutes.
Oh, great. So you have 6 minutes, Diana, and I know you can talk. So we're all gonna mute ourselves and listen for 6 minutes. But you gotta say whatever you can say about the work you're doing. And if you could focus in on Albany and Tifton and the work you've been doing there, and tell about your organization, OC. So if you could tell about that, that would be important. Because the way, I'll just tell them this, the way I met Diana was last year in April at a fair housing conference. And she was so powerful there. I invited her to work together. So we've been working together for over a year. And then I told her about the Fannie Lou Hamer branch, and she immediately joined because she's a Fannie Lou Hamer, I want to tell you. And so we've been working together through the Fannie Lou Hamer branch. And Jan Quarterman came and visited us last year and took us to lunch at Chili's. And so Diana Brown was there and another member of the Fannie Lou Hamer branch. So there's been some question as to whether or not there are any other members of the Fannie Lou Hamer branch other than me. Well, Diana is one of our important members in Albany, Tifton area. So if you could explain about OC and that would be wonderful. And we're not charging the time that I'm talking to Diana. So Diana, you got 6 minutes to talk about the work you do in Albany and Tifton with OC. Oh, we can't hear you again. Say something, Diana, to see if we can hear you. Oh, I think she may be having trouble hearing us. She can't hear us.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Well, speak about Tifton, Albany, and OC.
Okay, I have a nonprofit organization called OC Fair Housing Home Care, and I take care of tenants and I also fight around their housing issue. And I also collaborate in Tilton as well with housing. And the work that I do on ground and that I fight for my tenants when it comes to filing fair housing complaint. And I also be an advocate for them with their landlords into getting things fixed and done, and especially our elders. So I'm working on 95 units. 95 units are disabled tenant, and capacity of 250 tenants can stay in the Husband Alone Tower. So when I started there, it had mildew, mold, bed bugs, cockroaches, leaking pipe, leaking sewer, and I began to work to form a committee there and build. And so we just had our meeting with one of our state senate that came last Thursday. And I had about 40 tenants that attend that meeting. All of them spoke out. All of them was talking about the mildew and now making them sick. They have lung issues. Some of them got COPD. Some of them got emphysema, got asthma. They are sick in this building. And so we was able to let them know about the elder abuse bill that passes, the 218 House bill. And we also will let them know about the 346 landlord reform retaliations illegal. And also I gave them the House Bill 404 and 8 consumer rights. And they have that right of a decent, fair living condition. So I've just rolled my sleeves up. I'll be boots on ground, fight for what's right, fight for fair housing, stable housing, and have those tenants to move out of that location so we can have some new development built for those disabled tenants. And they was talking about they don't have nowhere to go, but I told them HUD give you 95% of the fund that you need when you come to these that you need when you come to fixing their property. And so we want to know where the money go. HUD, so I gave them money over 20 years and they were not giving them any more. So now I'm trying to do an audit on them. So we want to know where the money and why these tenants consistently live like this. And we're going to hold them accountable. And also we're going to hold our mayor accountable because our mayor oversees those grants as well. And they ought to utilize those grants to these units and be prepared for any appropriate living condition a disabled tenant. This is a gullet and it's a negative on them. And also they was getting talked to by the property manager like they were children. So I gave her do's and don't as well. I gave her paperwork in her hand and tell her she got to abide by the law. I'm gonna write a complaint on her and I'm gonna file a abuse complaint on her. And I just did it yesterday. I'm not going to play with them with these disabled tenants. And also we got private tenants. So now I helped the young lady in Tilton. She was living in mildew and mold. I wrote up her some letter paperwork and gave her paperwork. So they were able to test it and they were able to just go in there and remodel her whole apartment and then credit her some rent. So I'm working hard out here on ground and I hold them accountable. I don't care what it looks like, they're all going to be held accountable. And I'm going to roll my sleeves and I'm going to stand. And that's the ground root I do in Albany and Tilton.
Now, George, if you could put up the agenda on the screen so we can see where we are, because it's a little after 7, I believe. And so we have a few minutes for Q&A. before we do the announcements and the upcoming meetings. So let's open the floor. If you could raise your hand using the reaction button. Thank you, George. You can take down the agenda. Thank you, George. And so Jean, Gloria, Julia, in that order, please ask your questions. Please unmute yourself, Jean. And do you have any questions for Diana?
Yes. So can the state of Georgia help you, or is it all up to the city of Albany? I know what I'm familiar with, like in Cambridge, they have rent codes, you know, they're capped. They can't go any higher. That's Cambridge, Massachusetts, but the state doesn't have any.
Yes,
Control.
the state can help. And I will be going to HUD, not this week coming, but the following week, I will be in HUD office. And holding them accountable for not doing what they need to do.
Okay, that's housing and urban development. But is that federal or
Jean,
state? Yeah.
Jean, you asked a very important question because I lived in Massachusetts when the whole state of Massachusetts had rent control. And I remember what happened in Cambridge and everywhere when rent control bit the dust in the 90s. The real estate people were making big bucks. I was in, listen, Jean, I was in a 3rd floor walk-up 5-room, beautiful place. And I was subletting it. The person who had the place, her rent was only $350 a month. Yeah. And that was in 1994. When rent control fell, that rent for that unit went up to $1,200. And so it was a disaster. So I'm glad to hear that Cambridge, the People's Republic of Cambridge, had come back and put a little bit of a stop to it. But statewide in Boston is just crazy. And so they didn't do anything, but it's good to hear about Cambridge.
Well, I'm not living there now, so I don't know what the present
Where do you live now? Oh, you live in Vermont.
Yeah.
So since you're speaking, Jean, why don't you say a little bit about the housing issue in Vermont that's got you interested? Because I heard the housing insecurity in Vermont is really bad.
Yeah, it is, especially in the cities. Even in, we've got a wonderful mayor lot in Winooski where many of the immigrants live. And it was, you know, affordable and a really diverse city. But we just had an article in a newspaper of a couple with a child who are going to move to North Carolina because they can't afford the rent in Winooski anymore. So, but we had a terrible time this past year with so many homeless people, and they were actually forming a housing encampment on a city block that was a park. And they are actually building a kitchen on it for themselves. They were building community, and then the mayor and the police came along and threw them out. And some of them were placed in somehow other housing. But I mean, we need to build simpler housing. I've written a proposal for just everyone needs 150 square feet with a bathroom and a kitchen sink and a window and a door they can lock. So. It's just.
Oh yeah, that's the small house solution that was talked about in the video.
Was it?
I could deal with that. I'm in a house that is really great, 1,580 square feet. And because the landlord is a decent landlord, I only pay $1,045 a month.
Wow, that's good.
I moved from a corporate apartment pay $1,427. And this is on a house in a historic Black neighborhood. So lots of the homes here are affordable. And so I'm just living my best life. So if we could go to Gloria to see if Gloria has a question before we move the agenda. Gloria, do you have a question for Diana? Or would you like to say anything about Indiana or Chicago?
Yeah, right now the phone was ringing and I moved it somewhere. I don't even know where it is. It was probably a junk call anyway. But I have a couple things I just put in and one that I didn't get the link for yet. And I want you to see it because then you have something in your chat that's definite. A very long established place is the Casa Maria. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Catholic worker houses. Have you heard of those?
Yeah,
Started by
as a
Dorothy
matter of
Day.
fact, Gloria in Garner, North Carolina, one of our board members of the Southern Anti-Racism, Patrick O'Neill, who's famous for standing up to nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
He is lives in a Catholic worker house.
Okay, so you
we
know
do
about
know
that.
how serious they are.
We've got a good one, and the man's name, if you want to look it up, Brian Flagg, is very articulate, and he will go in the paper and put in editorials. And so they had a big event, and it made they try to keep us out of the news. They don't want to talk, but they know how to get press, and they got like front page coverage of the tenants union and Casa Maria suing a notorious slumlord and telling him he better get out of town. So I don't know where that's going to go, but I've given you the what we have, and now I know about the tenants union here in Tucson.
Oh, that is important information. So I'm glad we're getting these state reports in. So we're coming to North Carolina, where Julia Bishop is. She lives at the beach, but I'm sure there's a lot of housing insecurity at the beach. So Julia, you want to tell us what homelessness and the unhoused situation is like in Southport and Wilmington and around that area, Julia? Julia, unmute yourself. Well, while we're waiting on her, George, could you tell us what you know about because I know you had a hard time finding the house that you have. So why don't you tell us what the rents are like in the Southern Piedmont area?
Well, I was surprised to hear Jean say that somebody's coming to North Carolina because they couldn't afford the rents in Massachusetts. They're not really affordable in North Carolina either. The house that I live in with my sister and her two kids is over 30% of my income. And my income is not horribly low. And we're gonna have our lease renewed soon. So they're likely to raise that rent. So it'll be more than 30% or close to 35 or 40%. And folks who do not have the same kind of income I have, who are working for minimum wage or working for $10 an hour or less, which is about what people offer for jobs in the manufacturing plants, mills, or a job in fast food is not going to pay you more than $8 to $10 an hour, which is not enough to rent a house. It's not enough to rent an apartment. We do not have a Diana Brown in the Piedmont, someone who can fight for tenants' rights and try to keep a cap on rent, but it certainly does give the Southern Piedmont branch things to focus on and work on. Because
it's about time because the Southern Piedmont branch doesn't have a project. And the Fannie Lou Hamer branch has the Housing Justice Project. So it would be great if all branches, Jean, the Burlington branch, I think it sounds like you're ready to bring the Housing Justice Campaign into the Burlington branch, in addition to being part of Women, Money, and Democracy. So we have to make sure that happens. And so the one thing I will say is that the Housing and Urban Development, which controls the public housing, which is the only really affordable housing. And now they give out the Section 8 vouchers. So you got lots of these so-called choice housing vouchers. And that's where the low-income people run into the slumlords, which is why it's so important that the poor people who are getting the housing vouchers, because the housing authority simply does not have enough units. They say there are over 700 units short here in Columbus. And what they did, they put out a call saying we have Section 8 vouchers to give away. And they said within 2 hours, they got 1,500 requests. 1,500 requests for the vouchers. They had to shut down the program. So that's the madness that's going on, the lack of affordable housing. And so the reparations ordinance that we're trying to get passed by 2028 in the Muskogee County is going to address housing because the Columbus Consolidated Government, Diana, owns a lot of land. And so that land is being used to for development, and the developers are coming and they're not doing affordable housing. Well, we're really getting ready to put the brakes on the developers that I had to run for. I left one apartment complex where they raised my rent from $705 to $1,300, and I jumped into the at another apartment complex where they said the rent was $1,304, but by the time they got through adding stuff, it went up to $1,427. So I took them to court, and they agreed to let me out of the lease, and that's how I found the place I'm in. So I'm living my best life now in a house with my own carport, big front yard, big backyard for $1,045 a month. And what I've learned from my experiences here in Columbus is that if you really, really look, you will find some friendly landlords who are renting houses. But on the corporate apartments, forget it. You're not going to get a break. So Diana, Julia seems to be unable to unmute herself. So Diana, could you tell us about the award you're going to be receiving on June 22nd? What's it about?
The war is about me doing community advocacy work in our community and also in Tilton, because I have been doing a lot of work over the years when I was young in Tilton as well with police brutalities. And so that was one of my first community advocate that I did in Tilton, and had a news press as well. And I was able to have charges dismissed off some of the plaintiff that was there. And then now I'm doing a lot of work in like voting, get out to vote, right around housing issues and special housing issues, because they are in a need in Tilton with they don't really have like a lot of affordable housing. Everything is so expensive, and it's growing, but the income is not growing. The income, and so they need that transparency there. So they don't have a spokesperson like me there. So I decided just to branch out in Tilton to help, because it's my hometown as well. And in Worth County as well, the same thing in Sylvester, Georgia. So I'm kind of working like Albany and Sylvester and Tilton with housing and helping people to understand their rights when it comes to, reporting these issues. They are so afraid to report how they live and how their apartment is falling apart, because they say they don't have nowhere to go. If they report it, they'll get kicked out and the landlord gonna kick them out. I said, he can't do that. They can't do that. So when I re-educate them on their rights, and then they have that right to speak up, and I stand beside them. And I also coerce them to do the right thing by speaking out on their condition. Don't be afraid to tell the landlord to come fix his property. That's his job to fix his property. And now we got these laws in place. So you and give them a copy of the laws and explain it to them. And so now they see it, and now they begin to speak out about it. And
Oh yeah, we're on a roll in Georgia, where it looks like Julia was able to unmute herself. So Julia, the question for you is what's going on in Southport and around the beach as it relates to the unhoused and affordable housing? Can you speak to that, Julia?
Well, we actually have a lot of unhoused people. We have it's more towards Wilmington. We have 2 huge homeless encampments. And I myself had said, if I lost my home, that's where I'd have to go because there is no affordable housing. The housing authority has been shut down for over 5 years.
Oh, wow.
They completely shut down. They had no funding. They were, and my question is why? They're getting the funding, but they're not giving it out, just like Diana said. Now they have reopened it. I understand that the vouchers got gone very quickly, but they only give you a single person. Okay, so they consider me elderly and my daughter as a caregiver because I was in a wheelchair. And for someone like me, they only give you $790 a month for a 3-bedroom. You can't rent anything here for less than $1,200 a month. That's the
Wow.
bottom. We're fortunate that we rent from the same landlord for the last 18 years. He knows us. He knows that we don't tear things up. He doesn't have a problem with it. But I have talked to the housing authority and I've talked to helping my neighbor right now. She has a huge hole in her children's bedroom in the ceiling where the air conditioning dripped. And I said, Misty, I will help you. We've got to get this fixed because this can kill your kids. This is black mold. You can't have this mold in your house.
Yes.
And she's my wall neighbor because I'm in a duplex. It's 1,000 square feet. The rent is $1,095 a month. I make 15. It's me, my daughter, and my granddaughter. And it is 3-bedroom, 2-bath. He does keep it up. He's a good guy. He's a very good guy. And I said, just call Brian. He will come out and they'll fix it. No problem. And but I do know that there is there's several elderly apartments here that are riddled with black mold. They have bug issues. They have the bed bugs. They had everything. You can just look at them. They're just so gross, even from the outside. And there's like 5 years ago, there was a 5-year waiting list to get into those. So we actually have no affordable housing here at all. It's a major issue. And everyone I know is moving somewhere else where they can get, housing that at least within the parameters that HUD's given them or the housing authority. They just simply don't pay enough. So a lot of landlords here just let you pay the difference, which is against the law. But what do? They're in a bad situation. So the people I've talked to just don't know what to do. And I encourage my neighbor to please apply, get online, apply with housing, get your housing because her husband just left her. She's got a special needs child. He completely abandoned the family. So I've given her legal advice and I'm going to help her get back on her feet. To the point that she can afford to find a place to live that's safe and good for her, or at least fix the one she has now because our landlord, Brian, will fix it. You just got to call him. And I said, Missy, just call him. He will come fix it. That's it. He'll fix it.
Well, that is really good news to find a good landlord. My landlord here, when he read about me on the internet, the rent was $1,075. And when the agent called me and I said, I see somebody else has applied for this same house. And they said, yeah, but you have the first right of refusal. I said, I love the house. I want to have it. And he says, well, the rent will be $1,045. And the landlord let me pay the deposit in 2 parts.
Mine does that.
I paid the first $500 of the $1,000 deposit. I paid it in February. And then he said, make the second payment in March. And it's just amazing how easy he is to work with. He's 80 years old and he lives up in the Atlanta area. And he says he's gonna, through his agent, because I haven't talked to him, but he and I bank at the same bank. So when it comes time to pay the rent, I just go and transfer money from my account to his account because he's given me his account number. And so my lease with him is a one pager. The lease I had with the corporate apartment I just left, who actually evicted me, really, that apartment lease was 52 pages long. It is a legal document that basically says you have no rights and the apartment complex has all the rights. But my new landlord is a one pager. And I told him I will never be late on the rent. He says, well, you have until the 5th of the month. I said, I get every cent I'm going to get by the 3rd of the month. So I will always pay on time. So I plan to live in this house until I die, good people. So thank you, George, for putting up the agenda because we do need to close out. So the main announcement is that the Southern Anti-Racism Network is doing, it's not No to NATO, George. Oh, that's a different announcement. The UN Decade Reparations organized the South Solidarity Tour is taking place on May 21st and May 23rd, and both stops will be via Zoom. So from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. On May 21st, we will be in Ohio. Ohio on May 21st and Michigan on May 23rd. And in Ohio, we have Maureen Taylor, who will be talking about water in the Flint situation in Detroit. And then in Michigan, we're going to have Alan Haber of the Ann Arbor Ypsilanti branch speaking about this important moment as it relates to students fighting for a democratic society. Because Alan Haber, who's in his late 80s, was the founder of Students for a Democratic Society in the 60s. And so that's a real plus that we have Alan speaking, and he's a member of WILF. So there will be WILF members sprinkled throughout the tour, but we're asking the Detroit branch to come to the tour because hopefully Maureen Taylor will join the Detroit branch because she lives in Detroit. So this tour has a strategic objective of trying to rebuild the Cleveland branch because most of the folks that we know will be speaking from Cleveland. George Friday and I have lots of connections with Cleveland. So that's the announcement I want to make about the Midwest Organized the South Solidarity Tour. And George, if you could make the announcement about the No to NATO meetings we've been attending, that WILF Disarm members have been attending. You need to make that announcement, George. Thank you.
Sure. International, oh, no, sorry, I'm confused about Palestine. The No to NATO work group, organized by World Beyond War, led by David Swanson, have been working since January to pull together events the weekend right before the 75th anniversary, I'm saying those sarcastically, of NATO, which Biden invited NATO to come celebrate in DC. Stupidest mistake I can't even imagine. So at George Washington University on Saturday, July 7th, Friday, July 7th, there'll be an all-day conference with speakers and panel discussions and breakout conversations about NATO and NATO as it is manifested in different parts of the world. On
Well, thank you,
Saturday,
George. We don't need all the details.
okay,
Because the DMV branch, based in DC, they're doing a lot of work around Palestine solidarity, and they know about the No to NATO. So we're hoping that they participate in that. Well, George, you want to help me out by reading off the upcoming advancing human rights meetings,
right.
because our four working groups got a lot of stuff going on. So George, why don't you put the agenda back up so everybody can see the meetings coming up? Thank you.
Sure. Save your dates. Save the date for these meetings. Tomorrow, it's not on here, but you'll get another opportunity to register tomorrow morning. No. I'm sorry, I'm wrong.
Oh, George, let me do it, George.
Go ahead.
A week from tomorrow, which is May 16th, a Thursday, there will be the UN Decade Reparations Working Group meeting. And so that meeting is going to take up all of the issues associated with reparations and the UN Decade. We may have a guest speaker at that meeting. I think Kim Poole, who went to the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent, she may be able to join us next week on the 16th. And then on Sunday, May 19th at 5 p.m., the Border and Migration Justice Working Group will meet, and that's headed up by Adrian Bernal, who is also a member of the SARN board. So the Southern Anti-Racism Network has been working very hard to build the human rights working groups. And so we do have ourselves engaged in all of the four working groups. And George Friday and I work closely together to help continue that engagement. And finally, the umbrella meeting of Advancing Human Rights, Gene, where all of the working groups are asked to come and report. That's going to be on May 20th at 8 p.m. And all of these meetings, thanks to George, are organized on Zoom using George's account. Are there any questions or last words? Jean, any
No.
questions or
No,
last
as long as I
words?
get another email describing it all, so I can we invite other people to these meetings, or
Absolutely. These meetings are open to all WILF members.
to WILF members, right?
To WILF members.
Okay.
And so every now and then we'll have a guest speaker who's not a WILF member. And we always ask them to join because part of our strategy for advancing human rights is to build WILF. And so we've started all these branches in the South, Gene. So our goal is to build WILF. And I know in New England, there are only a few branches. So we have Boston, and we have Cape Cod, and we have Burlington. I'm trying to think, there used to be other branches in New England, but I think those are the only three remaining. Am I right?
As far as I know, yeah, you would think there'd be one in Maine. It's becoming more progressive state. So,
Well, there used to be one in Maine, I heard.
oh, really?
Because I
Okay.
actually met someone from there who's quite elderly. And so partly what happens is the branches age out. And so that's
Yeah.
why there's no branch. So George, is there anything else you would like to add? Please save the chat, George, and of course save the recording. And we'll send it out to everybody on the Advancing Human Rights list, as well as the branches list. So everybody gets to hear about this meeting with the spirit of Fannie Lou Hamer, Diana Brown speaking. She's totally grassroots. Wasn't she wonderful? And see, she has to go to work tonight because she does home care. So she has to start her job with home care around 8ish. So she's probably heading off to that. So we're so happy she came. But I think I'll see her at 8 o'clock when we have our other board meeting, George. So I'll see you at 8, George.
Okay.
So thank you, Julia. We'll keep talking
Okay.
because Julia manages the Southern Anti-Racism Network Facebook accounts. And we have over 2,500 members in our big group. And so Julia makes sure the spam and all the other folks stay out of that. And we love Julia for doing that. Thank you, Julie. So
I
thank you,
Finally
Jean.
figured it out.
Well,
We
thank
haven't
you,
had
Jean.
any
It is so
since,
good to it is so good to meet you, Jean. And I've never been to
Thank
Vermont, but I lived in Rhode Island and Boston. And I'm
Ah.
gonna make a trip to Vermont because I understand it's beautiful.
It
I
is.
promise not to come in the winter,
Nope.
so maybe I can make it up there this summer.
Summer, August.
August,
August.
great.
It could be hot
All right,
though.
take care. Good night, y'all.
Well, I can do
Thank
hot.
you for
I can
welcoming
do
me.
Hi,
hot.
George.
I can do hot. Thank you. And good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Night, everyone.
Good night.